I think that Jim, Rocky, Jim's aesthetic, Brian, they belonged, what they were doing was, interestingly enough, is reaching back to old cinema and inventing it and playing with it in a new and kind of fresh and edgy way. And I think that they reached back to a cinema that was quite a theatrical cinema language. You know, the movies of the 30s and the 40s, whether they were Hammer horror or they were musicals, they were a language where the audience understood that they were participating with the screen. And he was quite organic about that. Later on, we were quite serious about it. So I note, and I might be wrong, but the whole red curtain, the whole idea that you're let in on the idea that you're watching a movie and in on the irony of it. It's a two-pronged attack. There's two experiences. You both participate and observe it. So to a certain degree, yes, absolutely, it's been an influence. And Jim and Brian and all that, we just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Death to naturalism. I mean, I grew up around psychological drama and doing sort of first reality stuff, you know, so, and Brecht and all of that. So the theatricality of it, yes, it was definitely a direct influence. Anyone else with, yes? Susan's got to answer that one. I'm fascinated by that one for you.
Well, it didn't do anything for a long time because it just didn't exist. You know, it had a long gestation period. And then I find that people have a tendency, journalists have a tendency always to ask me questions that put me on the defensive. Like they expect me to want to disown the Rocky Horror Show for some reason. I don't know if it's because I'm running around half-dressed or I'm not sure why, but I think now, you know, maybe it's earned some kind of respectability, but certainly in the beginning, it was kind of like what happened when I started championing ping pong. They were like, excuse me, what did you do? You know, where did that film come from and what is that? And because I guess I was really the only person that anybody knew, you know, so a lot of it went on me, and because, you know, I don't think, unless you were in LA, I don't even know how long the show ran. Did it run in New York, the actual theater production? I mean, I remember it in LA, but I didn't see it in New York, and so it didn't reach that many people in the theater, so when the film came out, it was, people couldn't, you know, and then they kind of blamed me. But I even then, I wasn't, I thought this is great, you know, how fabulous. And how did it affect my life? I don't know. I mean, I did have parents, I was telling Baz that I had parents that wrote me letters threatening me, telling me to tell their kids to leave their Rocky Horror Show costumes at home before they went to college or they were getting cut off. And so I did have a little bit of a fantasy of all these disgruntled suburban parents having to drive their kids to the cinema at midnight, you know, and that was what was going to take me down at some point. Not anything to do with politics, just really like I can't do this one more time. And give up my weekend from anyway. So it could be my legacy. Who knows? That would be kind of interesting.
I think Susan's got an amazing point, just to add that on a technical level. My understanding is, just from a cursory glance at the web, is that it was reviled critically when it came out. And it's pretty much been reviled a lot from the odd kind of heavy intellectual who sort of weighs in on it. Now you've got to counter that with the fact that it was, I think in 2005, the Library of Congress, what's that when they sign a piece of culture up as significant? What's that called? It's exactly. And it was registered nationally by the Library of Congress because of its cultural significance and effect upon culture. And you see, that'd be my own take on things. I'm much more interested in the things that affect culture in an enduring way not how they're particularly received at the time. Because if you start playing that game, well, a guy called Shakespeare would have been, he was reviled, by the way, by the critic. Reviled. I mean, Rocky got off lightly, right? And he's done all right. So I think the fact that Congress has said, you know, say what you like, our friends the critics, and there's nothing wrong with that, there's some really illuminating criticism out there, but clearly, forget all that, it's had an enduring and continuing effect upon culture.
It's been in a lot of films too. I wonder how many films.
That's what
A film within a film, I'm not, but a few films, because I'm always having to sign forms saying it's all right if it's in the movie. So I know somewhere it's out there in a number of movies yet, still.
Well, I re-looked at Fame recently to check something for something I'm working on. And it's in there, and I was reminded, apart from the fact that I was reminded that Fame, which I thought was kind of a lovely pop cultural film, was like, got some really, films in those times that seemed to be broad entertainments had a lot more shocking issues in them. You would be shocked what's in Saturday Night Fever. Shocked. I guarantee you. There's a gang rape in that, and the lead actor is sitting in the car at the time and turns and says something I can't repeat in the cinema afterwards. That guy's name's John Travolta. You know, you'd be shocked. In Fame, you know, there's a child molested in it. It's a really, you know, I thought it was like people were leaping on top of taxis. But what I remember is, for me as a young person, what an influence. I mean, oh, Fame, wow. I mean, New York, that's where you want to be, right? And in that, the two young couples that get together, they go to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show, probably here, around the corner, and they go through the whole ritual. And as a young person, I remember thinking, yeah, New York, it's cool. I want to be there, you know? But yeah, it's been in a lot. So it's
in Wallflower too.
Yeah.
Recently.
So it's beyond a film, I think. Other questions? Down the back, I think. Hi, what's your...
There's still a lot of things I'm afraid of, so I have lots of things to work with here. Did I keep any souvenirs from the film? Yeah, I think I had the corset or something for a while. Trying to think, they gave us a garter belt at one point for some anniversary that I think is still around too. But it was a very no-frills experience. In fact, on top of everything else, the gal that was helping me dress and everything set my trailer on fire. I lost a lot of my own clothes. So I never got reimbursed. Come to think of it. I don't have, you know, just the stuff that's happened and afterwards. Yeah. But you can buy those outfits a lot of places. My little outfit I see, though, everyone dressed in them, so they must be pretty easy to find, I guess.
You know, Sue Blaine designed the show, and also an Aussie, but what I know is that most of the costumes and all of the props from the theatre show, they just used in the movie. Because Jim had never made a movie before, they had such a low budget. They just thought that's how you did it. You just sort of dragged it along and then they did other costumes and things. But Susan, I got to ask, because I shouldn't, because everyone else is dying to ask questions, but I'm dying to ask, just thinking of costume, I see mine's falling apart. when you made it, and it was harsh to make, and, you know, cold, you lost all your clothes in a tragic fire, left only with a corset to face the world. But in all seriousness, like, it must have been a great effort, and one of those kind of, you know, this is crazy, and you do it, and then it gets buried. What was the feeling like before it had been rebirthed? I mean, you know, did you just think, well, that was so crazy, no wonder it didn't take off, or did you rationalize it?
No. I mean, but I don't think that way. I mean, I was really happy having, it was so difficult for me to get through some of the parts of it, you know, in terms of the singing, that I felt that I'd accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish. Plus, it brought me, you know, closer to Tim, and Nell for a while was in New York, which was great. Patty was in Richard Woods, but so I was satisfied. I had gotten a lot from it, you know. I learned pretty early on to not look for satisfaction with what happens afterwards, because it just breaks your heart if you look at it that way. You know how you toil away even more as a director. You spend years on something, and then, you know, the studio decides to, you know, release it for 3 days or something, and pulls it, or just this bad planning, or bad, you know, there's so many ways for them to fuck it up. So you just learn really, really early on to be so grateful for the experience of making it, and the friends that you make, and what you learn, and, you know, how you work from fear to someplace that's fairly stable, and so you know, it seemed to make sense. I had been to Charlie Bluehorn's house, actually, because I was going out with William Hall, and he had a gold-plated toilet that was like a throne. So I wasn't that surprised. I knew he was a little, I had been around him a little bit, and, you know, these guys that run these studios, you know, they're not like us. So, and they're still not like us. So, you know, it wasn't surprising to me, but I was really happy when it started popping out. That was just the strangest phenomenon ever.
I think it's hard to forget, it's easy to forget just how, like now, but then, that film, and, you know, the lead character's kind of in suspenders and is a transsexual from Transylvania, singing, you know what I mean, like just how kind of out there it would have seemed, and how wonderful it is that it found its, I mean, it gives you hope.
Well, and also at that point there wasn't the second line films that don't get supported and don't get a decent release. You can find them now in other places so easily, but that wasn't true then. So yeah, they were so buried. Yeah. Had no idea she was the promised being slutty. I'm shocked.
Me neither, actually.
No, I thought she was just suffering from having to be smarter than him, but always being nice, as girls are supposed to be, and had this underlying anger that this guy was such a jerk, and so, you know, and also she was sitting on some lust of some sort. But I'm really sorry that you made her into a slut. Put one in the head.
That's entertaining.
I just want to thank you for the mini cinema Friday nights at Univale on Long Island. So many good memories. I think this is one of my favorite beat tracks in my car. It's really blasting.
Did you dress up?
I was one throwing rice and water guns and so forth. I didn't dress up. It's a different set of jaws. I don't remember that from the original poster. Was it on there?
Yeah.
Different of the words. Different set of jaws.
I don't think so. Was it?
Same time as Jaws, is that why? Right, there we go. That would have been some marketing idea for Fox, yeah. Stephen over here, Jim over there. A different set of Jaws.
think
use
the
it.
spirit of the fact that there was no money and it had been in the theater for so long, and these people were, you know, had figured everything out, and there's something about being young and hungry and not having a huge budget to, I mean, it was just done in a spirit, and I think that kind of, you can see it on the screen, and I think that adds to this encouragement of you to make art out of whatever it is that you have. And if it was really done with a big budget and very glossy, and I mean, even when they tried to redo the stage show, you know, it just wasn't dirty enough.
You know what? There's a pretty interesting answer to that. Jim told me they did do a sequel with a lot of money called Shock Treatment, and he said, and it was terrible.
They asked me to do it.
Right, good, good call. No, but he, you know, Jim was really clear about that. Like, I think what he describes, and he's right, particular to this, and particular to the success, is that the absolute one-off alchemy. Like, Jim's got this long letter he sent to me. I emailed him about this. It's really beautiful. I wish I had time to read it, but I can't read. And it would go horribly wrong. And he mentions Susan in an intimate way on the set of Atlanta. And I'll check with you if that was true. Preparing for a role was. Now you want to hear it, right? But he does say, I mean, he went on to say, well, don't forget that one of the things about it is that we were all young. I mean, they were all mid-20s. You know, and it was in a period when young was king. It was this new period where to be young, you were king. And so 25, and you know, the way they made it, I think it can, I mean, he goes on to say it's not very, there are a lot of steps that are out of time, it's like imperfect. And that's where the human quality in it is so lively, and I think Susan's absolutely right. The nature of that is if you go and sort of do a perfect, multi-million-dollar version, you'd be better off doing some other kind of interpretation of it. I think that's legitimate, you know? Do Rocky the Opera or something, you know, but... any other...
I've seen a lot of different kinds of productions on stage because they invite me, and I saw one on Long Island City, or a special school there for kids that have all kinds of different brains, you know, autistic and other things, doing the Rocky Horror Show. That was pretty interesting. And also I've seen it, and a girl had the lead, had a tennis part in that. And their questions, I saw the rehearsal, the dress rehearsal. I'm not sure that they understood who I was, but they were still asking me questions. But it's a very interesting, something about the structure of it and the simplicity of it that lends itself to different kinds of people feeling connected with it. So many different groups you're talking about. I think that's, we definitely have made progress in terms of some fluidity, and if you haven't seen Transparent, I've seen a few episodes of that, and that's amazing. I'm about to do a movie about a girl, 16-year-old girl that's going to transition. So I mean, it's with the intention of having a dialogue that's in the present, that's, you know, try to normalize it. I hate the word normal, but so I think in that sense we are. I don't think in terms of producers. I don't think in terms of the business, no. I think if anything, the banker head has become more and more, is stronger, and it's all decided by, you know, who you cast, who's got how many followers, and what's your this queue and that queue, and there's very few instances, especially if it goes over $2 million budget or something. Even with the tiny films where you can cast somebody that's just the right person, let alone the story that you want to tell that isn't, you know, it's that funny thing that we love it, we love it, we love it, now let's change it. And, you know, does it have to be that gay? Does it really have to be a suicide? You know, all the major elements that are in something initially, and then they just get nervous, right? And so you get away with murder. I don't know how you do it. You do all kinds of
I was trained by Jim.
Stuff.
Yeah.
But you
But-
did money, and that's why they trust you.
No, somebody donated me this lovely jacket. Actually, I thought you hit a really, really important point, and I think Susan knows. Look, and something I'm working on, I'm going back to a lot of the films made in this period, not because of Rocky, but I've been meticulously going through them. You know that example I gave about Saturday Night Fever? Or Fame? I mean, honestly, I said to my 10-year-old, darling, you should see Fame, because she's interested in, you know, schools where they dance and things like that. I went back, I was like, I realised then that those films that we grew up with, just, you know, I mean, forget The Godfather and, you know, like, films that were being made there, the actual, the social confrontation, and yet they were profoundly entertaining, and they were broad, they were films that were reaching very broadly. I realised that there has been a massive and kind of almost very subtle, invisible shift into that thing. Does it have to be? Couldn't it be? What's interesting is that there's a greater liberation, I think, in some television, cable television. There's a greater freedom in the writing there. That's where you see liberation. And in film, yes, I can see
And
that.
documentaries, I think,
Documentaries
there's been
are
an
great,
amazing public switch in terms of actually seeing documentaries as entertainment, and there's so many good ones with all these little cameras that people can now use. There's a lot of interesting films being done, but distribution is the question, I think, now.
I mean, I think it's a bigger subject. I'm not shirking it, but it's a really big subject. We'll get off track on it, which is basically about who buys tickets to the cinema. You know, I can remember, we had a little cinema when I was growing up in a tiny country town. And, you know, you have to remember, everybody went to the movies, and event cinema meant, you know, there were things that children went to and families went to, but there were also things that all adults went to. There's not a lot of broad-based cinema that all adults go to. Who buys tickets to the movies? What is the big movie-buying force? I mean, you know, Comic-Con, fantastic, but there's a reason why it's so absolutely potent. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, that kind of adult, I do long for those big, they're great, smaller adult films, but I really long for those big, you know, subjects that are done on a big scale that can pay their price because a big audience goes to see them. And they're not necessarily, you know, narrowed down. And there were more of them, I think. I mean, maybe I'm just starting to sound a little bit older, but I think there were more of them when I was growing up. Yes.